Well, good morning, Charmaine, and thank you so much for joining us and participating in the development of these lived experience, collective voices, resources for families and friends of people who have been caring for those who have been experiencing suicidal crisis and emotional distress. And yeah, it's such a valuable resource that we're putting together, and we really thank you for being a part of it. So, welcome.
I feel welcome and thank you. It's a lovely platform and it's also a place where a person can just share and just be truthful because a lot of the time we may wear masks within the grief spectrum because a lot of times you can't just share your story because it comes over as a hit and run because your audience is not always prepared to have to deal with the severity of what you've gone through. So I truly appreciate this.
Absolutely. And I just wondered today if we can start with if you can just give us a little bit of context around your lived experience as someone who has cared for people. So if you could just start with that, please.
Well, my son was the first one that, of my children that had an attempted suicide, and that's been about 9 years. It's nearly 10, and it's been a journey of. I was once shared the part of holding life like an ice block in your palm of your hand. So you've got to hold it loosely. But it was a traumatic experience because nothing prepares you for it. So, and then a few years after that of being, aware of that and working in the sector and helping people, it was the devastating moment when Shani, my eldest, where, she's got the happy face of depression, suicided, and it was it was something so surreal. You process, but you also have to realize that life goes on, and it's within that mer of what do we do, how do we go, that you start to think back of what were the pointers that you received the first time. And one of the things that really helped me with Conrad as a carer was when the psychologist or psychiatrist came and spoke to us, the one thing that he mentioned that was so important and vital was to not take control. Allow them choice, allow them to still feel as if they're valuable, and not want to just remake them and push your agenda onto them. And that helped a lot.
It sounds like some great advice to get early on around sort of a mindset towards caring for your son and allowing him that, I guess, that little bit of ownership around his own life and having that influence as well. Just wondering, like, getting that advice. I think I heard you describe it the other day. It was don't treat him like a prisoner and don't control him, is I think how you said it. Just wondering, how did that impact and influence you from that moment on?
Um, as a mum, we're our genes are sort of set up to mother and smother, and we sometimes unknowingly take choice away from our children. And the way that we structure life is, even as a clinician, I've found that is we talk down. We don't, it's easy to go to a toddler's level, but how do you go to somebody that is losing hope in life? How do you go to the level of, the smog, the darkness, the hopelessness? And in that is the one key thing that helped me is this is his journey, not mine. I'm a gatekeeper. And all I have to do is be there, open up, and hold space. And that's how that information has, over the years, developed into something that even assists me in my daily living towards other people, is being aware of it's like treading lightly in somebody else's garden because they planted, they love, they nurturing, they doing what they can with what they've got. And if you just swoop in and take over, or like phrases that I've heard through the years, is just toughen up. Tomorrow will be better. Those are empty type of things that just they don't have the essence to be in the moment with that person.
I love that visual picture of tread lightly in someone else's garden, and the picture I'm getting the way you talk just then is almost like by working with your son or someone else as a carer, it's almost like when they need some help, it's almost like, hey, can you water my garden for me today because I'm going to be away? And it's that invitation into to support them and really just help them grow and help their life be as beautiful as it can be, but in a setting that is governed by them and sort of somewhat given their influence with it. I heard you speak about the role of a gatekeeper, and you referred to it, well, gatekeeper or life keeper is something that you described to me as a process of always checking if the gate's open and always checking if the gate's closed. I'm just wondering, how does that impact your life, like building your life around constantly checking the gates and constantly just having that in your life of going, is it open or is it closed, and going through that process?
Seeing it as being a gatekeeper is part of understanding that there are consequences, there are signs, but to approach it in a way with, and it's not a positivity like a kumbaya, everything's good type of positivity, is everything has an essence. And in my work with kids, I'll never forget one of my little cancer patients saying to me, sadness saved the day. And sometimes we need to just be in a sad moment with our loved one, and be, with a negative mindset. You bring to the table all your unresolved issues, all your emotions, all your expectations, your biases, your assumptions, your judgments, all those things. And being a gatekeeper to me means I check on the gate. If it's open, it could be that I just need to close it. Or if it's closed, I can't just rest in the fact that it's closed, so there's no problem. Sometimes the closed gate heralds more problems than solving it, because you don't know, have they been to the river? Are they back? Do I need to open the gate and go down and look for them? Or do I need to just collect and calm myself and say, where am I at? Am I in a position? Because a lot of times in your stressed moments, it's the worst thing to approach the person that you're caring for, because they are already overwhelmed, overtaxed. So sometimes finding a closed gate is saying, I need to check my attitude. I need to check my space, that I'm healthy enough. If I need to walk down to the river and assist them, or I need to walk back to go and have a look what's going on, my attitude is of the utmost importance. Because if, even with rescue and mining and stuff like that, we are taught to first take care of ourselves and then to move in a position that you can help somebody. So that's been utmost, because me and Conrad's conversations would pivot around negative things and problems. And it's easy to sort of get stuck. And all of a sudden, you're not a gatekeeper, you're the river. You are causing them to feel drowning, to feel overwhelmed, because you're packing negative things, and you're highlighting the despair even more. So being able to check yourself, that you are not adding to the overwhelmedness by bringing in your unresolved issues. because it's very easy to put your hands onto somebody's shoulders in water and think they're stable, and then you just push and they go under. And that's why it's so important for me to know who I am in every situation that I go into, because uncertainty is currently my feeling the killer of society. Everything, COVID, finances, work-related problems, all of that causes uncertainty. And if we as carers can understand that uncertainty is a absolute current in every situation, and by knowing who you are, you don't contribute to that mass of uncertainty that the people are battling with, that we all battle with every day.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. And definitely like an experience I've had in conversations with people, that uncertainty and the unknown is often some of the scariest stuff that we experience, because we even end up creating these scenarios. But it sounds like you've got a really good process around somewhat critical self-reflection when you get to that unknown part, where you come to yourself first and go, how am I going? Like, what's happening for me? And is that going to be passed on to the person I'm caring for? But just wondering, like, how does that impact you, like as a person, that lens? It sounds like it's almost like a quality, a good quality that you've got now in yourself. But does that stem in other areas of your life as well?
It stems into so many different aspects, because two of the things, I cared for Conrad, and then I lost Shani. And unknowingly, a massive, if a person can say it, it's nearly like an infection. The vengeance and hatred and anger that is part of grief gets a hold of you, and it decimates the caring side in you. It doesn't leave space at all for feeling compassion. Previously in my life, empathy was an easy way to look kind and caring. But when you lose a child or anybody that's loved, our DNA is actually not set up for that. The pattern of life, it's terrible to deal with loss, and loss brings grief. But I've found that grief is a teacher. She's a dorm matron. She's a facilitator. Because sometimes in my journey with Conrad, he's also, though I'm his carer, he's become my carer. And we've learned in this process to hold space for each other. So when he sometimes has to deal with something, he also tests my waters. Or he says to me, Mum, I really need your, I need to chat. Then I say to him, if you can give me, say, an hour. Sometimes I have to say to him, could we talk tomorrow? How serious is this? Because knowing who you are is also knowing that you're not in the right space. You hold that space, but you don't go in to disrupt it or decimate it. It needs to be held. And that brings me again back to the thing. I read about this way of holding life loosely, and the example is holding an ice cube in the palm of your hand. If you start to close your fingers over it, it becomes messy and the ice cube melts very quickly. But when you hold it lightly, it still melts. It's still messy, but it's manageable. And to me, those difficult situations where somebody is really giving you their raw truth is going to cause panic. It's going to cause you to want to again control and take over. But sometimes in uncertainty, you step back and you enter into knowing who you are. And I've had a lot of criticism in, people that are uninformed, of thinking, but you got over it so quick. You handled it so well. Do you really care? And those parts are going to come to test the faith that you have in your own kindness. And you need to have trust in yourself. I think the biggest attack that I experienced was with a colleague. And again, he's uninformed. Lived experience changes this part to stop working and this part to open. And lived experience gives you compassion within a situation. And when this colleague said to me, "You're a clinician, you should have known, you should have seen the signs." And a part of me was just wanting to rip him apart. And then I realized I need to know who I am. And losing Shani is something that to this day, if I allow access to that part of me, this is who I am. I'm a mess. But that doesn't aid anything. It doesn't bring her back. It doesn't change anything. And when you lose a loved one, their love never dies. It stays there. And it's like energy that needs to be spent. So the part of knowing myself is also knowing what Shani meant to me. And the footprint of love that she left is way greater than the pain and the trauma of losing somebody that you absolutely cared for, that you gave life to. And I've lost 2 friends to suicide because of being part of the cancer group. You lose hope. And death by choice is called suicide. But none of us truly understand why we enter into that channel or tunnel. And that's basically what I found, is to really know who you are and be honest with yourself. Don't come with the kumbaya and the hashtags and the frillies and the whatever. It's worthless. It's absolutely worthless.
Thank you. Thank you for the honesty and sharing around that as well. And yeah, grief is definitely a teacher. Like, it teaches us so much about ourselves and about other people around us. But the other thing that sometimes comes with grief is that question around what if. And I'm just wondering, like, how have you handled the what ifs in your life and kept such sight on caring for others in spite of that what ifs that exist there?
The what ifs, yes, they came, and they came in with me because I was at uni and studying and a research student. It propelled me into writing a dissertation of about 92 pages on, what causes suicide. How do people get to that? Having a partner that was narcissistic, how did that impact her? So I went at it full force to conquer it, to want to make a change. And I was questioning everything. You go to all these support meetings, you become part of, you go and look at what Beyond Blue's got to do, Black Dog, Lifeline, all those things. And no matter how you look at wanting to correct the system, suicide has been with us since the beginning of this whole earthly existence. It happens in mass, it happens in singularity. It hooks onto people and never leaves them for their whole lifetime. I've had experiences with people that have been battling this smog for years and years and just staying one step ahead of it. But when you sit down with those people and you allow compassion, not sympathy or empathy or anything like that. Compassion to really understand that each and every one of us daily fight the battle of life. Death is actually a given, and it's a momentary entering in and out. It's just there. It's a very definite. But the way that I've found myself having to conquer this darkness is the joy is in the journey, not in the destination. So find joy. Spiritually, God says, count all things joy. And as a agnostic and a more scientific, I approach life more scientific, I was upset with God and said, okay, how can I take this? This is the ultimate. How can I find joy in it? And when you accept reality, when you stop being angry and seeking things your way, you step through and you journey and you allow love. I know I shared this with you as a teenager. I walked into, we had to do our confessional things and stuff. And on the minister's desk, this was this scripture about love. And I said, nope, I'm not signing up for that. I'm not long-suffering. I do keep account of the bad. How am I going to do that? And grief is the teacher that shows you that you've got more in you than you ever realized. Because it's not what happens to us. It's how we react to it. And being able to use the energy of love that Chani has left in my life, to use the energy of love that Conrad consistently brings, has changed me from a person that doesn't just know what I don't want, but to become a person to know what is it that I want, and to start working towards the four tables of life. It's our needs, our wants, our desires, and our passion. And those four table legs need to grow together if you want to put something on top of it. And that's what's made me personally have a journey, is what is this making me? Do I want to spend, my moments in pathetic? Do I want to spend my moments in vengeance or anger? Or do I want to allow what has happened to me to govern my journey forward, that I find joy in the journey? Because the destination takes care of itself. But having joy within even bad moments, learning to laugh again, learning that it's okay to be happy within sadness. That's been a major part that has revealed it's impacted my work. It's impacted the way that I deal with people, because all of a sudden I've become somebody that doesn't fret over little things. But it's nearly like we did a study on equanimity. And equanimity means standing still in the presence of the positive and the negative, and allowing yourself to draw on the wisdom of pain. And that is the part that I'm seeking to instill, not just in myself, but in everybody that I meet, is to introduce them to themselves. Because if they know who they are, uncertainty has less of a hold.
Thank you. And yeah, that's a great answer. And it sounds like grief for you has been the ultimate teacher in learning how to speak with other people and speak at a language that comes from a place of compassion. not judgment, a place of really understanding people where they're at and what they're going through. And as someone who has faced bereavement with the death of your daughter and then caring for your son at the moment, I'm just wondering what do you do for self-care for you, and like where does that come into your priority and your hierarchy of life?
Well, I've got two amazing colleagues, and we've been intertwined by different scenarios. In in the beginning, there was no self-care for me at all. After Shani's passing, it was 4 days, and I was in for major cancer surgery. And then, about 4 years after surviving the pancreatic cancer, I was invited to talk. And at that stage, I've been through a lot of things and roses in the ocean and learning about safe language. And this person said to me, you must, just give your testimony. And I said, do you want it unprepared? Do you want me to write something? And she said, no, just talk out of your heart. And for the weirdest moment, I had to step back and say, what did I do? And I was on autopilot. And that's the biggest danger, is to go onto autopilot as your self-care. So 4 years after Shani, I only realized that I had no self-care plan. I was just this emotional ball of, I didn't know what. I didn't know who I was and what was going on. So when they asked me, how did you survive pancreatic cancer? It was blunt. I said to them, just have your daughter kill herself. And it caused such a stir. It was the quickest that I was whisked off and taken to a side and really talked at and said, how dare you? These people aren't prepared. And I was angry in the sense of, why are you talking at me? You invited me. And then that was when I realized how raw I was and what a mess I was, because I hadn't even processed my chemo. It was just all this blur. And then you need to step back into yourself. And then you have to be truthful. So that, to me, is the first step of self-care, is taking a step back and becoming honest with yourself. And in this journey, I shared with a colleague of mine, and she said to me, listen, yeah, I can handle this part. Weekly we have a session. If you need it, we have more. If you don't, then we space it longer. So our journey began, and it's been 3 years of amazing truth and honesty, because with her, I can take a step back and just bring all the muck, all the shrivelment, all the anger and things in that. But what I was unaware is that I had infected myself with vengeance and wanting to get back at who I perceived caused this problem, caused my daughter's death. And it was one of the in one of the sessions that I had, that one of the lived experience collective mentioned that we must be aware of that, because that does way more damage than the loss of a loved one, is when you allow to plant vengeance in your garden, because it decimates love. It constricts compassion. It constricts caring. It just becomes terrible. So the day that I had to go and meet, he is a trauma therapist. My son said to me the morning, Conrad said, Mum, you need to forgive and let go. And that was the second phase of my self-care, is to learn on a massively, if you allow weeds, they'll take over. And that's the part that I found with the vengeance. It had impacted so many areas of my life. And it's like it's underlying. And so I see this friend of mine on a regular basis, monthly. I call him my friend, but he's my therapist in the sense of being able to deal with vengeance. And don't ever think, oh, I've done it. It comes in subtle moments. So that's myself. And my son is also part of my self-care, because we allocate days that become sort of nothing else must happen on that day. And Conrad has become the proud dad of a young little kid that's now my grandchild. And he was born on Shani's birthday. And that was an emotional crisis that you cannot believe, because I said, that's a sad day. I don't want him to be born on that day. And then all of a sudden, as I said to you, the joy is in the journey. The universe had completely different plans. And what was a sad day is now a day of hope and happiness, and a new little individual with all their quirks to make a space. And Conrad, seeing him work with Ruan, he's working with the principles of holding space, of not just taking over and being, you shall do like I want you to do. And it's beautiful to see life in action. And I think it keys in with a lived experience. When we live something, we know it, we feel it, and that opens the gateway to compassion.
So it's a nice way of summing up self-care, and even just articulating it, taking on a very pictorial journey of how it is for you. When you mentioned about opening up unlocking sort of that vengeance that you were holding, and really just releasing the emotions that you have, it sounds like what I know is sort of that emotional agility thing, where you allow space for whatever you're feeling in your life just to be expressed and come out. I'm just wondering, how does that impact your ability caring for your son when you're having these sessions, if like you feel yourself holding things that are probably not going to be that conducive for your son? How does that influence I think you described it as the dance that you and your son do every day with each other? How does that influence the dance if it's a day where you're going, I just don't have it today?
He's on many occasions, I took him with the previous recordings to the both of us were there, so that we could show them who and what we are. And a lot of the times he enters into becoming my gatekeeper. And so many times he said to me, he says, Mum, I've watched you with the kids that you work with, and I work on a basis of reality. We can't learn something if we haven't experienced it. Now, this one, you can edit it out, but it's something that just came to mind. I had a little redhead that was obstinately angry the whole time. And his parents and everybody was saying, this is unacceptable behavior. But how do you explain to a 5-year-old that his behavior is unacceptable? So we're having dinosaur wars on my sensory carpets, and I lose my balance and I face plant. And in that moment, because I use what I can, I put my bum in the air and I started, just crawling around on this carpet. And he flew up and he said, Charmaine, that's unacceptable. And he sat down and he looked at me, and I said to him, how did my actions make you feel? He says, I was embarrassed. He says, you're a big old woman and you were doing this crazy stuff. And I said to him, Billy, do you understand how Mum or Dad or the teacher feels? And he's like, oh. So to answer your question, me and Conrad take and hold each other. We hold space for each other. So if I'm going through a bad day, he steps in and becomes a carer, because we need that pattern of life in us. And my vulnerability towards my son and my truth, do not tax him. The same I feel as a carer. When my son brings his vulnerability and his truth, I'm not taxed, because that's true intimacy. Into me you see. And I think in a society, that's the biggest thing that's lacking, is intimacy, is sharing your vulnerability and sharing your truth, and having people understand, I might look as if I'm successful or whatever, but I have bad days, I have bad moments, I have the same vulnerabilities, and I also don't want to face my truths. There's some days that I just don't want to. But when you allow yourself to be vulnerable and truthful, it changes things. Because otherwise you become the stoic rock. And you can't cuddle a rock. You can't relax with a rock. And if you take it, if you agitate it, that rock becomes a weapon, and you start wanting to bash or throw it. And in your mind, you're busy doing something good, but you're actually harming somebody else. So in the you're okay, or it's okay to be not okay, has been our sort of theme song in tango. But when I am okay, it also creates the place that I can walk into Conrad's life any moment, and he can walk into mine. And we've learned to trust in each other and value our intimacy. So I hope that answers that.
It does. It does. Previously, when we spoke, you spoke about the solitary journey of suicide, and in that journey around honoring and respecting the decisions that people make in life. And you even put reference to that, even respecting the thoughts that your son has from time to time around suicide. Just wondering, what does the solitary journey of suicide, what does that mean to you or mean for you?
One of the hardest things as a mum, when you have to process that your daughter passed, and in my instance, Shani was in hospital when she was born, and she was in intensive care. And the next time she was in hospital was with her death, and again intensive care. So her body was perfect. So she was up for organ transplants and donation and all those things. But it was within a moment, having a moment with her before, they were going to go for the operation. All of a sudden, I realized she had to go through this all by herself. There was nobody there with her but her little cat. And in that moment, I could walk to my son and say to him, I can only be in your life in the moments that we're together. But what I realize, suicide doesn't bring a crowd. It doesn't want too much attention. It actually just you want to so slowly just walk away. You want to slowly disappear. And when we as people accept things, we lessen the horridness, the hold, the blackness. When you say to somebody, I accept that you're on this journey. I don't want to change you. The fact that you are feeling all of these things means you're an amazingly sensitive person. You're intuitive. And I love these abilities of yours. and opening up conversation about death, about the meaning of life and how quick it can change. And that has enabled me to be a carer even in death, in the transitioning, in the thinking, in the conversation. And I went to a death cafe meeting in Sydney because a friend of mine from South Africa is in Chicago, and she said, Charmaine, you need to go to a death cafe. I was like, she says, there must be a death cafe in Australia. Just go and look for a death cafe. And I went, and it is a place where you can communicate and talk about death, the allure, the need, where it, what space does it hold in your life? And this is a bit of a reveal. I am I need to feel something to understand it. I drive my parents wild. I drive my husband wild, my kids, everything, because I need experiences. It's within those solitary moments that you start becoming more aware of your need to live, and allowing people to understand that is something that's very special.
Absolutely. Okay, you've spoken a lot about the power of connection and that human connection aspect, and you also mentioned about like the God impact in your life. So someone who's grown up with faith in your life as part of what you do and part of how you operate, and the belief in the miraculous things that can happen in the world, how has this changed in your, like, how has that influenced your ability as a carer? Like, what does it do for you, or is it hindrance, or how does it impact you?
In a lot of sense, it is an hindrance because you keep expecting the miraculous, and that takes your eyes away from seeing the miraculous happen in front of you. So previously in my way, I nearly drowned in a riptide at Jeffreys, and so I wasn't too keen to go and get into the water, and I was caring for my dad, and it's as if you block off. But going into the water and seeing all these people that he touched over the 32 years that he'd spent there was amazing. And then all of a sudden, I became aware of a very warm presence. And these guys were all on their surfboards, and I was solitary in the water. So I was really, what's this? And all of a sudden, the one guy, notioned and said it was a pod of dolphins that had joined everything. And in that moment of vulnerability and fear, I sort of, you go, oh, am I going to be okay? And then I became aware of 3 of them that were around me. And it was as if they'd come to just take care of me in that moment. And the whole moment of honoring my dad and experiencing something that I think I would never, ever have experienced had I not just made a decision. And it was actually wasn't made in a great moment. It was like, let me just get this over and done with. And then coming back with that, and then realizing, but this is the miracles. This is the moments. I didn't want to alert these guys that I'm petrified of the water because of what I'd experienced, and because that would mean they'd be hovering around me, and it just didn't. But for some reason, these dolphins came. And so what I've learned, where I previously used to think this is the form that a miracle looks like, I've looked at it differently. And I went back and shared with my dad, and I had a chat and said to him, it's okay. I'll hold your hand. We can do this journey together. And he said, I don't want to do that to you. And so we left it. And just before I left, I could spend a few moments just close with him. And he whispered in my ear, he said, I'm going to see Shani first. And he just gave a smack on my cheek, because being religious, a few of my family members basically said that Shani's going to hell because of what she did. And I don't believe that. I believe in a God that has love for each and every individual of us, no matter where we've been, what we've done, and who we've hurt. And he's there in your last moments to welcome you back. And just having my dad, in a weird way, it's also a miracle, saying he's going to see her first, because he called me every day after she passed. And we don't see the everyday eternity in moments, because we get tangled in them. And we've actually got to untangle from reality and accept the eternal, that everything works together for the greater good of mankind, because we have a creator that absolutely loves us from the beginning to the end, warts and problems and whatever. And realizing that my dad was excited to be reunited with his granddaughter, and in a moment I could say to him, please give her a hug, tell her mum loves her. And he said to me, she knows that. She's never doubted it. And that's the one question that I as a mum had, is why wasn't the love that I had for her or she had for me enough? But it's because suicide and making a choice, God gave that to each and every individual. And he had wisdom, because our choice is our freedom. And having choice, no matter how bleak it is something that I've learned to accept. So I got completely lost.
It's okay. Thank you. Look, I want to pivot back to something you mentioned about before, and your face lit up, and that's about your son being a dad now, and how inspiring it is for you to see your son being a dad and show his love towards his son and his wife or his partner.
Yep.
Partner. I just wanted to find out, what has this blessing, like in your life of a grandson, meant for you and your relationship with your son? How has that impacted it? How has it influenced it?
Immensely. When you have to take responsibility up for another life, a life that you brought to this earth, there's certain elements, it's nearly like things get unlocked inside you. When you feel lost, you lose a certain ability to nurture. And we need to be able to nurture, to know how to nurture ourselves. And watching my son become a nurturer towards his son and his partner, even through the pregnancy, he was involved. And then with the birth, she's a tiny little person, and we had Ruan he's a big boy. And Conrad, even with the COVID restrictions and all those things, just stayed on point. He didn't leave her side. He a friend of mine is in the nursing staff in John Hunter, and she said to me, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Oh, I've become a nana." And she says, "I told them, it's somebody I know's son, this one." And she said he didn't leave her side. He was there in all the moments. And that's the part that he didn't leave, and he was there in all her moments. Showed me that nurturing had become part of who he was. And the way that none of us are prepared to have kids. I don't know if you've got kids, Tyler. There's
I've
no
got a
book,
son, yes.
no course, no nothing that prepares you. And you do the best that you know to do. But it's when you bring the nurturing, that nurturing flows back to you. Because old Mother Teresa always used to say, if you want peace, become peace. And caring for my dad at his end, we had one moment, and again, please forgive my humor and stuff in that way. I had to give him his dentures, and I gave it to him the wrong way out, and he yelled, "Christ!" And I said, "No, Dad, he'll be here another time, but now you're dealing with Charmaine, your daughter." It was the first time that I could, because my dad's authority, I'd heard the word Christ a lot of times, and that to me triggered, I've got to honor my father so that my days may be lengthened and get to a place of safety and just not, disturb him. But within that moment, because I was in a nurturing mode, it was as if I was encapsulated against the the authority or the anger or the discontentment or disappointment that we as kids have to endure. And it was from that moment that the caring towards my dad also became better. I started to nurture, not to care. So Conrad has become a nurturer. And it's not an insurance policy. Oh, he's going to be great now he's got a reason to live. That's like generics. It's within the fact that he's grown into nurturing, that if he starts allowing that inside him, he becomes a better version of himself. He's more equipped to be truthful to himself, to enter into intimacy, to be able to see his vulnerabilities and to be truthful to himself. Because Ruan is a really good teacher. He's got attitude, he's got voice, he's got no, I don't want this. He's not a no boy, but he's like, the head goes. And kids don't really have agendas, but they do bring you to attention. No matter how you want to sideswipe it, you learn more about yourself when you become a parent, because they teach you humility. They teach you that nothing you planned works the way you want it to. They bring a fun element, and I've watched Conrad go, wow, and play, and then out of the corner of your eye, I see Michaela like, and Conrad's like, and then she says, he's a baby. And he said, no, he's my son. But we've got to learn to respect and to be gentle and to be free. And that's one of the most important things that I've seen my son grow into, is to become nurturative.
Thank you so much. And I really just want to honor you for your time today, and thank you for the discussion. I've thoroughly enjoyed every second of it. And I really just want to honor you as someone who has conquered so much. And I truly believe you've got a heart of a conqueror within you and such a strong spirit. My final question for you today is, what's your proudest moment as a carer on this journey? I mean, it's probably hard to top what you've just described about him becoming a dad, but I'm just wondering if there's anything else.
It was one of my proudest moments was taking Conrad with me when we were filming the previous ones. And, we can talk. I've got the gift of the gab. I'm a good storyteller. But when you open up the truth and you stay in it, and it's not fabricated, it's not a put on, it's not plastic, it's not whatever. And having somebody sit next to you that you've taken care of, and they know you're going to take care of until, you maybe go or whatever. It's when that person puts their arm around you and says, I really appreciate my mum. It's as if there's a scripture that says the balm of Gilead. And the balm of Gilead oozes into rocks and hard places. And having Conrad stay in a relationship that we've worked hard to have and be protective about it has really made me know that I make a difference, because a difference is not seen in big moments. A difference is not seen in receiving awards and accolades or whatever. The difference is somebody that says you've got value and I appreciate who you are. Because there are times that our discussions need a different kind of truth. We have to work through raw, difficult things. So as a carer, it's not just a moonshine, kumbaya walk. It's scary. I don't have answers. I can just, spend time with you. I can just listen. We can just sit together and do nothing, or play video games, or muck up together. And that's the part of when you know who you are and that it's okay and you're accepted, is an amazing moment.
A great way to finish this conversation. And yeah, thank you so much. I'm sure your story and your way to articulate with words is going to be impactful for many people's lives who are out there on their journey as a carer. So thank you so much, Charmaine.
It's been a pleasure. And to all the carers, if ever you feel lost, go inward. You've got all the answers, you've got all the abilities right inside you, because God has made us fearfully. And I remember as a kid once, not knowing who I was, and I was a rebellious, questioning just a difficult person. And my nana was illustrating children's Bible books, and I just plowed through everything. She says, read the Bible. And I read, and the next minute I go and I say, what's this word? And she said, what word? I said, peculiar. And she said to me, that's how God made us. I said, I've got a place. I'm peculiar. And it's within the peculiarity of each individual. If a person puts it this way, Tynan, you are a phenomena in this universe, this world, everything you do. And the peculiarities that you've got, the things, your loves, your hates, your this, everything makes you equipped for the journey that you're on, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And understanding that you have a place and that you're peculiar was what helped me. So I want to say to every person, don't give up hope. Go inside. Everything you need is just locked by becoming aware, being truthful, being kind, and trust towards yourself. And you on your journey. Be a conqueror, not a survivor. Enjoy the journey, because that's where the joy lies. The destination will look after itself. And thank you. This has been an amazing interview. I really appreciate this.
Great. Thank you.